Imagine two identical twins. Let us call them Mark and Dave. They are 30 years old. They have the exact same job, and they earn the exact same salary of $75,000 a year. They live in identical houses right next door to each other in the exact same suburban neighborhood, and they drive the exact same model of gray sedan. On paper, their financial lives are completely indistinguishable from one another. But over the next 30 years, Mark is going to pay $250,000 more than Dave for the exact same life. Mark is not going to light this money on fire, and he is not going to lose it in a bad cryptocurrency gamble. He is going to hand it over directly to banks, insurance companies, and landlords, simply because a secret three-digit number attached to his name is 640 instead of 760. This is the invisible tax that nobody talks about. We obsess over income taxes and sales taxes, but we completely ignore the credit tax, which is arguably the most aggressive wealth destroyer in the modern economy. Today, we are going to expose the systemic illusions that keep hard-working people permanently trapped in a cycle of financial struggle. We are going to perform a forensic audit on the credit score scam, the devastating math of the poverty premium, and the psychological warfare that extracts your wealth before you even realize it is gone. If you have ever felt like you are working harder every single year but your bank balance never seems to actually go up, or if you feel like one bad Tuesday could ruin your entire financial year, you need to understand the invisible equations that are working against you. Here is the first thing that blows people's minds about the financial system. The credit score as we know it, the FICO score, is actually younger than Taylor Swift. It was introduced in 1989. Before that time, lending decisions were made by humans. Now that old system had its own massive problems with bias and racism, absolutely. But the new system simply swapped human bias for algorithmic ruthlessness. We have been brainwashed into thinking that this score is a fundamental pillar of human civilization, dating back to ancient Rome or something similar. But it is actually a very recent corporate invention. It was designed to standardize risk for the sole purpose of securitizing debt. And in doing so, it created a caste system where the prime borrowers get free money and the subprime borrowers pay a surcharge on their very existence. Let us look at the math because the numbers are genuinely terrifying. The biggest purchase of your life is typically a home. Let us say you want to buy a $400,000 house in this market. If you have a gold-plated credit score of 760 or higher, you might get the best advertised interest rate, which we will hypothetically call 6%. But if you have a score of 620, which is considered fair and is exactly where millions of hardworking people sit, banks view you as a risk. They do not deny you the loan because that would be leaving money on the table. Instead, they charge you a risk premium. They bump your interest rate up. It does not look like much on the brochure, maybe just 1.5% higher, taking you to 7.5%. It sounds like pennies and it sounds trivial. But if you run the amortization schedule on a 30-year mortgage for that house, that 1.5% difference adds up to roughly $120,000 in extra interest payments. Think about that reality for a second. You are buying the exact same drywall, the exact same roof, and the exact same patch of grass as your neighbor, but you are paying over $100,000 more simply because an algorithm from 1989 said so. That is $100,000 that you cannot invest in the stock market. If you had invested that difference over 30 years, it would have compounded into $500,000. So the true opportunity cost of a bad credit score is not just the extra interest you pay to the bank. It is the absolute destruction of your future retirement fund. It is wealth that is transferred directly from your pocket to the bank's bottom line. But the scam goes much deeper than just housing loans. This is where it gets into dystopian territory. Your credit score is no longer just about lending. It has become a universal reputation score. In most states, auto insurance companies use your credit score to determine your premium. They have decided, based on their actuarial tables, that if you have a lower credit score, you are statistically more likely to crash your car. So even if you have a perfect driving record, have never had a ticket, have never had an accident, and you drive incredibly safely, if your credit score dips, your car insurance automatically goes up. Studies have shown that a driver with a clean record but poor credit often pays double what a driver with a driving under the influence conviction and perfect credit pays. Let that sink in. The system trusts a drunk driver with an 800 credit score more than a safe driver with a 600 score. This is the poverty premium in action, and it does not stop there. Landlords use it, utility companies use it to charge you security deposits, and even employers in certain sectors check it as part of a background check. You could be the most qualified candidate for a job, but if you missed a few payments 3 years ago during a medical emergency, you might be flagged as irresponsible and passed over. The score has mutated from a tool for banks to assess financial risk into a universal judgment of your value as a human being, determining where you can live, what you drive, and even where you can work. The most twisted part of this entire game is how the score is actually calculated. It does not measure your wealth. You could have $10 million in cash sitting in a duffel bag, but if you have never taken out a loan, you might have a 0 or unscorable credit rating. To the algorithm, you are a ghost. You do not exist. Conversely, you could be completely broke, living paycheck to paycheck and drowning in minimum payments, but if you constantly borrow money and pay it back just in time, you are considered a superstar. The score rewards churn. It rewards participation in the endless cycle of debt. It hates people who use cash, and it hates people who pay off loans too early. Have you ever paid off a car loan and watched your credit score drop 20 points? That is the system telling you the quiet part out loud. They liked you better when you were paying them interest, and when you stop paying interest, you are less useful to them, so your score goes down. It is essentially a loyalty program for debt slaves. If you want to survive this, you have to understand the specific mechanics. The biggest chunk of your score, 35%, is your payment history. This is binary. You either paid on time or you did not. One missed payment can wreck you for years. But the second biggest chunk, 30%, is credit utilization. This is the ratio of how much credit you have versus how much you actually use. If you have a credit card with a $1,000 limit and you spend $500, your utilization is 50%. The algorithm hates that because it thinks you are desperate and it smells fear. But if you call the bank and get them to raise your limit to $10,000 and you still spend that exact same $500, your utilization drops to 5%. The algorithm loves that. You did not pay off any debt, you simply changed the denominator. This is a game of optics. The trick is to look like you have access to millions of dollars, but have absolutely zero desire to spend it. This optical illusion of wealth brings us to the authorized user hack, which is how rich families pass on good credit like a genetic trait. A parent with a perfect 800 credit score adds their 18-year-old child as an authorized user to their credit card. The child never even gets the physical card and never spends a single dime, but the entire history of that card, representing 20 years of perfect payments, gets copy and pasted onto the child's credit report. The child wakes up on their 19th birthday with a 780 credit score. They walk into a dealership and get a 0% interest loan. Meanwhile, the child whose parents have bad credit starts at 0, walks into the exact same dealership, and gets hit with a 15% predatory loan. This is one of the primary mechanisms of the invisible inheritance of inequality. But why do so many people have bad credit in the first place? Why do people miss payments and fall into the subprime category? To answer that, we have to look at the brutal mathematics of daily survival. Picture this scenario, because almost everyone has felt it in the pit of their stomach at least once. You are driving to work, maybe running a few minutes late, and suddenly that check engine light pops on. Your heart sinks. You know logically that fixing the problem right now might cost $300, But you look at your bank account and you have exactly $42 to your name until Friday. So you ignore it. You turn up the radio to drown out the weird rattling noise, and you pray. 2 months go by, and because you did not have that $300 then, the car breaks down on the highway. You need a tow truck, which is $200. The original part that was broken has now destroyed your transmission, so the repair is $2,000. And because you cannot get to work, you miss 2 shifts and lose $300 in wages. That initial inability to pay $300 has now spiraled into a $2,500 catastrophe. This is not just bad luck. This is a mathematical trap. It is the distinct, measurable, and suffocating cost of not having money. This brings us to a fundamental economic reality known as the Boots theory of socio-economic unfairness. The theory comes from a character named Sam Vimes in a Terry Pratchett novel, and it explains the wealth gap better than most economists with advanced degrees. The theory goes exactly like this. Take 2 men. One is rich and one is poor. The rich man buys a pair of $50 boots. They are high-quality leather, stitched properly, and those boots last him 10 solid years. The poor man cannot afford $50. He only has $10, so he buys the cheap cardboard-soled boots. But those boots fall apart after just 1 season. So the next year, he has to spend another $10, and the year after that. Over the same 10-year period, the poor man has spent $100 on boots, which is double what the rich man spent, and yet the poor man still has wet feet. The rich man is dry, comfortable, and $50 richer. This is the math of being poor. You are forced to pay a massive premium simply for the lack of capital. You might be thinking that this is just a nice story about boots from a novel, but this dynamic is everywhere in your actual life. Let us talk about something as basic as toilet paper. If you have $50 to spare, you go to a warehouse club and buy the mega pack of toilet paper. The cost per roll might come out to something like 50 cents, and you are completely set for months. But if you are living paycheck to paycheck, you do not have $50 to lock up in toilet paper inventory. You have $4. So you go to the corner store and you buy the 4-pack. The cost per roll is $1.50. You are literally paying 3 times more for the exact same product simply because you could not afford the bulk price. This poverty premium applies to laundry detergent, diapers, and almost every non-perishable good in your house. The math proves that if you are broke, your personal inflation rate is technically higher than a rich person's inflation rate because you are perpetually locked out of economies of scale. But it gets significantly darker than just groceries. Let us look at the banking system, which is designed to punish you for stumbling. If you have $10,000 in your checking account, the bank treats you like royalty. You get no monthly fees, free checks, and maybe even a little interest. But let us say you are struggling and you have $20 in your account. A subscription you forgot about hits for $25. You are now negative $5. Does the bank cover you because you are having a rough month? No, they hit you with a $35 overdraft fee. Think about the annual percentage rate on that transaction. You effectively borrowed $5 for a day, and it cost you $35. That is an interest rate of 700%. If a loan shark did that, they would go to prison. But when a bank does it, it is just standard corporate policy. Banks make billions of dollars in overdraft fees almost exclusively from people with less than $1,000 to their names. The rich get paid interest, while the poor pay interest. It is a massive wealth transfer from the bottom of society to the top, cleverly disguised as routine service fees. You might argue that people should just stop spending money they do not have. Theoretically, that is correct, but psychology plays a massive role here that we absolutely cannot ignore. There is a scientifically proven concept called scarcity mindset. Studies have shown that when you are legitimately worried about money, when you do not know how you are going to pay rent next week, your functional intelligence quotient actually drops by about 13 points. That is the cognitive equivalent of missing an entire night of sleep. Your brain is so overwhelmingly consumed with immediate survival that you physically lose the capacity to make long-term strategic decisions. This is exactly why, when people are broke, they often make decisions that look incredibly stupid to wealthy outsiders. They take the payday loan with 400% interest. They buy the lottery ticket, or they eat the fast food instead of cooking. It is not because they are unintelligent. It is because their cognitive bandwidth is completely maxed out just trying to survive the day. The Boots theory is not just about the math of money. It is about the math of mental energy. The rich man does not just save $50 on boots. He saves the mental energy of not having to worry about his feet getting wet for 10 years, allowing him to use that brain power to invest, learn a new skill, or start a business. The poor man is stuck in a devastating loop of constant, low-level panic. Let us dig deeper into this phenomenon with something much bigger than boots. Let us look at cars. In most American cities, you absolutely need a car to work. A wealthy person buys a 3-year-old reliable vehicle for $20,000, paying cash or getting a low-interest loan at 4%. That car runs for 10 years with just routine oil changes, keeping the total cost of ownership incredibly low. Now look at the person with bad credit and no savings. They need a car to get to the job to make the money. They go to a predatory buy here, pay here lot. The dealership sells them a high-mileage clunker that is worth maybe $4,000, but they sell it for $8,000. Then, because the buyer has a bad credit score, the interest rate is 24%. If you do the math over the life of that loan, they might pay $15,000 for a car that was originally worth $4,000. And here is the absolute worst part. The car will likely break down before the loan is even paid off. So they are still making aggressive monthly payments on a dead piece of metal while simultaneously trying to figure out how to finance a new one. This is the poverty trap in high definition. You are not just paying for the car, you are paying a massive risk premium because society has deemed you risky, and the only way to stop being risky is to have money, which you cannot save because you are continuously paying the risk premium. It is a perfectly engineered cycle designed to keep you exactly where you are. We have not even touched on housing. Renting versus owning is the ultimate Boots theory example. When you rent, you are paying 100% interest. You get absolutely zero equity. You are paying your landlord's mortgage plus a profit margin for them. But to escape this and buy a house, you need a down payment of $10,000 or $20,000. If you are paying 50% of your income in rent because rent prices are sky high, you can never save that down payment. You are permanently trapped paying $2,000 a month in rent for an apartment that would only cost you $1,200 a month if you actually owned it. The rich person buys the house, lowers their monthly overhead, and gains an asset that appreciates in value over time. The poor person pays more monthly for an asset they will never own. It is incredibly expensive to be poor because you are renting your entire existence. You are renting your shelter, you are renting your money through credit card interest, and you are renting your stability. Furthermore, there is a hidden tax on your time that compounds the financial damage. Think about the laundromat. If you have a washer and dryer in your own house, doing laundry takes 5 minutes of active work. You throw the clothes in, and you walk away. If you have to go to a laundromat, it costs you $5 in quarters, but it also costs you 2 hours of your life. You have to travel there, wait, and travel back. That is 2 hours you cannot spend working, resting, or being with your family. If you value your time at even minimum wage, the true cost of that laundry is astronomical. Or think about food deserts. If you live in a low-income area, you might not have a giant grocery store with fair prices nearby. You have a convenience store with inflated prices. To get to the real store, you might need to take a bus and pay a fare plus an hour of travel time. The friction of daily life is fundamentally higher when you do not have money. Everything is harder, everything takes longer, and time, as we know, is money. By stealing your time, poverty systematically steals your future earning potential. Now, I can hear the objections. This sounds depressing. It sounds like the system is completely rigged and you are permanently screwed because you cannot afford the nice boots. It is depressing, but understanding this brutal math is the absolute only way to break the equation. Most people ignore this reality because it is painful to confront. But you have to look at the numbers to find the exit door. Standard financial advice tells you to invest in the stock market to get an 8% return. But if you are poor, the best investment you can possibly make is not the S&P 500. It is escaping the Boots theory penalties. If you have credit card debt at 20% interest, paying that off is a guaranteed 20% return on your money. No stock picker in the world can promise you that. If you buy a reliable toaster for $50 so you do not have to replace the $10 one every single year, that is a massive return on investment. The first step out of this trap is not trying to get rich. It is trying to stop the bleeding. This brings us to the most critical concept for survival: the buffer. The only way to stop the cycle of buying the cheap boots is to artificially create a period where you do not buy any boots at all, so you can save for the good ones. This is exactly why the emergency fund, that first $1,000, is not just boring financial advice. It is the ultimate weapon that destroys the poverty premium. When you have $1,000 in the bank, a flat tire is a minor annoyance, not a devastating financial crisis that forces you into a predatory payday loan. That $1,000 allows you to increase your insurance deductible, which instantly lowers your monthly premium. Having money saved actually lowers your monthly bills. That $1,000 allows you to buy the bulk toilet paper. It allows you to fix the small leak under the sink before it becomes a massive floor replacement job. That first chunk of liquidity is the hardest money you will ever save, but it is also the most powerful, because it switches the game from defense to offense. You have to start looking at your purchases not just as spending, but as solving a problem permanently. When you finally get a little bit of cash, the psychological temptation is to treat yourself, because you have been depriving yourself for so long. You buy a nice dinner or a new shirt because you want to feel normal for a second. But if you take that cash and instead buy the high-quality work boots, or the reliable tires, or the dentist appointment to fix the cavity before it becomes a $3,000 root canal, you are effectively buying your future freedom. You are paying off the poor tax, so you never have to pay it again. It requires a massive shift in thinking from, "Can I afford this monthly payment?" to, "What is the total cost of ownership?" The dealership wants you to focus exclusively on the monthly payment because that hides the true devastating cost of the loan. You need to focus on the lifetime value. The system completely relies on your ignorance of these mechanics. Companies bank on you paying the late fees. They budget for your overdrafts. They depend on you buying the disposable razor blades again and again instead of the safety razor that lasts a lifetime. When you start making decisions based on the Boots theory, you become a terrible customer for them, but a magnificent chief financial officer for your own life. You have to get genuinely angry at the math. Use that frustration every single time you see a late fee or a convenience fee. Let that anger drive you to build that cash buffer. You are fighting a war against entropy, and your only ammunition is liquidity. You must also learn to manipulate the credit system that was designed to manipulate you. Automate every single minimum payment so you never suffer the 35% penalty for a late payment. Play the limit game by constantly asking for credit limit increases to artificially lower your credit utilization ratio, mastering the 30% of your score that relies on optics. Never close your oldest accounts, as they anchor your reputation. Do not treat the credit score as a validation of your self-worth. Treat it as a video game token that gets you access to cheap interest rates. The actionable step is not sexy, and it is not about buying cryptocurrency. You must audit your life for vampire costs caused by being broke. Look at where you are bleeding money simply because you lack capital. Identify the biggest leak, then ruthlessly cut everything else until you have the cash to plug that specific leak. If you need $500 to fix your car so it stops burning oil, working an extra weekend job is not just earning extra cash, it is a strategic strike against a future, much larger expense. You are buying your way out of the trap, one pair of boots at a time. This journey is unfair, and the wind is absolutely in your face at the start. But once you truly understand that being poor is a mathematical penalty, you can stop blaming yourself for being bad with money and start aggressively attacking the penalties themselves. You stop playing their rigged game, and you start playing your own. You buy the boots that last. You buy the freedom to say no to the bad loan. And eventually, with mathematics and absolute discipline, you walk right out of the hole.